Hey guys, it's Adam from LUCIDPIXUL and welcome back. I want to address probably one of the most common stressors and obstacles that all of us artists of every different walk of life face a lot more, arguably a lot more, than a lot of other professions do. And that's the topic of procrastination, of finding a way to motivate yourself, to push yourself, to inspire yourself, to be productive regularly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, keeping that momentum going throughout your career. And this can be something that's incredibly daunting and exhausting, and it's an obstacle that we face for many years. However, in my career and the career of many other professionals that I've met throughout my life, there's a certain turning point in your career where, for reasons that might even be a bit elusive to you, it starts to change. You start to find a momentum. You start to get this flow, this groove in your career. And that flow, that groove, that productivity can start to increase. And then, for reasons unbeknownst to you, it can start to go down again. And your career goes through these fluctuations of hyperproductivity and then it drops, and then hyperproductivity and then it drops. And that's very, very common. Not only common to my students online, but my own career for many, many years as well. And at a certain point in my career, when things started to change, for reasons I'll share with you, all of a sudden that stopped being an issue for me. And despite the fact that it stopped being an issue, I hadn't yet understood the reason why. And it wasn't until many, many years later, like well over a decade later, that it started to dawn on me what had changed in my life at that particular point in time, and realizing that that change was the important ingredient that kept me moving every single day. And it was very, very interesting, and it's going to offer you some insight into your own life. It's something that you can immediately reflect on right now in your artistic growth, your education, your career, wherever you are at this particular stage in your artistic journey, and reflect back on the past. And you can think to yourself, how productive was I at this period in my life? And why? And you might start getting answers to that. There's a reason why I feel this particular obstacle is something that might plague artists a lot more than any other profession, like law, like working in the service industry, like working in construction, like working in medicine, whatever the case might be. Because art in and of itself doesn't necessarily possess this ingredient that all these other professions do. And it's one of the reasons why very often, depending on where you're from internationally, you might come from a family or a culture or just a demographic of people that don't necessarily value art the way other professions are valued. And to get right to the chase, without kind of leaving this to the end of the video, because I want to talk about this quite a bit. Art inherently, or at least not apparently, not right off the bat, brings value to people outside of yourself. Art may seem to be, and very often is for many people, an inherently selfish profession. It's very self-satisfying and self-gratifying, or at least it feels that way. And this is how I felt about my own career, that art was my form of self-expression. It was the way I saw the world. It's the way I like things, and it's the way I like to express myself. And my perspective, as your perspective might be as well, is I'm going to express myself in a way that feels the most rewarding emotionally to me. And hopefully I'm going to be good enough at doing that other people are going to want to hire me and give me money for my art. Sound familiar? And that in and of itself is not a bad thing. That in and of itself is actually quite necessary. But that path of self-discovery as an artist may come at the cost of getting that bill collector phone call, having to deal with that unemployment line and have to pick up unemployment checks. It might lead to you having to find a secondary career working as a waiter or working in retail or something like that, just so you can pay your bills. Or it might require you to say one day, you know what? I don't think art's for me. The ends don't justify the means. Maybe the bad has outweighed the good for me. And that's why very often for many artists, they decide at a certain point in their career, you know what, I gotta focus my professional skills somewhere else. And they go back to school and they get another job and they get well paid and things start to pick up for them financially. Like, for instance, my mother who had a Bachelor of Fine Arts and ended up being a single mother of 3 and said, you know what, this ain't going to happen. So she had to go back to school and get her degree in computer science and had to go back and finish her high school math in order to achieve that. It was quite a big endeavor, especially for one of the only women in an entire faculty full of men. So it was a big deal for her and it's quite an accomplishment. That said, being raised by this woman, one thing that remained very, very obvious throughout my entire life of her having a great career and buying homes and renovating and doing all kinds of cool shit, she never ceased to be an artist. That never left her. Despite the fact that she made an active abandoning art and saying, screw this, that my children are going to starve to death. And she was right for believing that. Her children would have starved to death back in the 1970s when she made this decision. The artist never left her. Fast forward many decades, a successful career, all of these different things. The minute she retired, the minute she had the space, she gutted the downstairs floor and turned it into an art studio, and she's been painting full time ever since. This is where you come into the picture. In my mother's case, there was really no other option for her. Back in the day of that type of art, most art that was being produced, there was the few rare illustrators that worked in films and stuff like that, but the video game industry did not exist back in the 1970s. That wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. Video games didn't start coming out till I was a young kid. And the industry of art was basically, do or die, man. Good luck if you can get yourself into a gallery and you can find some way to market yourself, if you're good at marketing yourself, and you can produce a style of art that's very catchy that a lot of rich collectors of art want to spend their money on and that kind of thing, then great. You might do well for yourself. Not always, but maybe. But since then, especially since I had graduated from art school, when I graduated from animation and I got into fine art and then I got into animation after that, the industry was starting to change. And despite the fact that my lifelong pursuit educationally was to get a degree in animation, in classical animation, I wanted to be a Disney guy. That was my life goal from a very young age. The minute I stepped my feet into the professional pond, the fact that I was an artist with an animation background, and I was a video game geek, which back in those days, there weren't a lot of us, because I was literally, as a young kid, I was the generation of kids that became gamers. That was my generation. What was one of the original generations of gamers, which include the ColecoVision and the Atari 2600, and then there's the Sega Genesis, and there's the Nintendo and the Super NES, and then came out the Dreamcast, and I was there through that entire evolution of video games from the original Pong. I remember the original Pong. I remember when I had to put a sticker on my TV screen to serve as the net for the ping pong ball to go back and forth, because that was the extent of computer graphics back in the day. It's a pretty big deal. And I'm a gamer. I grew up playing Metroid. I grew up playing Mario Brothers. I grew up playing all these games, and I had this art. So unbeknownst to me, even when I had started learning animation and I started learning art, that there was going to be a career in gaming waiting for me at the other end of that route. A route that I had not planned for. And, the rest is history. I spent the next several decades working in film industries, mostly in video game, doing all kinds of stuff. And it was fun. But that was and continues to be a very new concept to the employment of art. And there are many artists out there, myself included, that don't fit in necessarily into that professional niche. It was always a bit of a struggle keeping up with the rest of my peers in that particular type of setting. And the reason being is, it was very industrialized. It was very show up, you've got a 9-to-5 job, and you are there to provide the service of art to the studio. And being an artist who was raised by a fine artist mother who would spend weeks, months working on big 7-foot canvases, that was a concept that wasn't a part of my DNA artistically. I was the type of person who thought, who pondered, who detailed, who edited, who evolved, who expressed through his art. Even if it wasn't something visual storytelling based, art to me has always been a form of self-expression. Visually, self-expression emotionally, the mood, the story. That's what art is. And that was the frequency I had gotten used to. So when I got into the gaming industry, into the film industry, and now I'm expected to do a 9-to-5 job as an artist. For somebody like me, and for many artists up until today, that's just not part of your artistic DNA. So you really might struggle. That's not the rhythm, that's not the energy and the rhythm and the tempo that your creative mind clicks on with. And that's where artists can struggle. And the artists that struggle in that environment, myself included, end up turning the blame on themselves, thinking to themselves, I don't have what it takes to succeed as an artist. So some of us get sacked a lot. Some of us struggle, don't get those promotions, don't feel as valued as other artists. And that was something that I felt for a very, very long time. I found my successes, but damn, man, it always felt like I was tugging against a horse the whole time when I was losing that fight. Until one day I decided to be selfish and tell myself, you know what, Adam? As Jim Carrey says, you can fail at what you don't love, so you might as well give a chance at what you do. And that's exactly what I did. And that's why one of the reasons why I love Jim Carrey's quote so much, because it really resonates with me. Jim Carrey's life and his attitude really resonates with me. That's why I was probably one of the reasons why in high school I was known as the Jim Carrey of my high school, because I used to do Jim Carrey impressions. I was the comedian of my class, basically. No, I'm not going to do a Jim Carrey impression for you, so F off. That's going to be my son's job, because he's the ADHD stand-up comedian in my family. But yeah, I realized at a certain point, I really have to reclaim my artistry. I have to reclaim my voice artistically. And I gave myself permission to become idealistic, to become personalized, to rebrand myself and create a form of art that was personal to me. And be damned what the industry might be looking for in terms of skills. Albeit, I mean, I have an animation background, a fine art background, I worked professionally for years, so my fundamentals were very, very solid at that point. But I felt like I was always working at half of my capacity. I always felt I had greater potential than what I was offering studios. And I was right for thinking that. And very surprisingly to me, when I combined my strong sense of fundamentals that I had forced myself to learn over the years, and I combined that with a much more genuine form of artistry, and I was doing so at a mood and a tempo and a process that made sense to me, that fit me. Within a year of that decision, not only had my art improved 30-fold, I found my voice again. I made discoveries about myself. I found growth I'd never found. And quite amazingly, I went from somebody who was chasing after employment and soliciting myself. I was standing on the street corner, wiggling my butt at anybody who'd look at me. I'd hop into the car, hypothetical car of any creepy guy who'd want to hire me for whatever, to being somebody who was getting phone calls from people I had never even heard of. People reaching out to me say, yeah, I saw your stuff online. I really love it. We'd love it if you'd be able to work on a project with us. And I'm like, okay. That was unimaginable to me a year prior to that decision. Now, I did earn that achievement, but that achievement would not have happened had I not made that decision in my own life. But something else was happening at the same time as that I didn't realize was happening, that I was doing, that actually contributed far more to my productivity, to my longevity, to my inspiration and creativity, to my growth, to my perfectionism, to my professionalism, than I realized, because it was happening almost exactly in tandem to the time I made this artistic decision. And that other thing that was happening at the same time was I started becoming a YouTuber. I started producing videos online and sharing my experiences with you guys. And it started, if you want to see the early, I kept all of my videos online. I've never deleted the old stuff, but you can see me with some, Diablo 3 shitty, crappy headset and my 720p little gray ball desktop Logitech webcam, and no lighting at all, just, the lighting that was coming in my window if I was lucky. Completely unprofessional stuff. But I started to share art talks just like this, and I started to share tutorials and lessons and stuff like that. Stuff to this day that some of it's actually pretty good. I was like, hey, that was pretty good back then, even though I didn't have the same production quality that I have today. But I was slowly but surely committing myself to this regular upload of content, sharing videos, looking for ideas, putting my best foot forward, slowly but surely tweaking and working on my presentation skills, and slowly building myself up until now, where I have an entire studio with professional audio and video equipment, and a school, and all this kind of cool stuff. LucidPIXUL, the school, didn't exist back then. LucidPIXUL only started back in 2015. So this is prior to that, or at least 3-4 years before that. And what I didn't realize was happening, and what I want you to take away from this, is the fact that what this YouTube channel was integrating into my life was accountability. I was putting myself at the service of others. I wasn't just producing artwork for myself. I wasn't producing a portfolio that I felt satisfied with and hopefully you'll come in and enjoy my work. No, now I'm producing artwork, my artwork, but now I'm presenting it to an audience along with other content that if I stop doing it, or if I don't do it regularly, or if the quality is just sloppy, then I'm not providing that quality to my audience. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just producing artwork for myself, I was producing artwork for an audience. And to me, my YouTube audience was something that I held in much higher regard than, let's say, a studio. Because in a studio, building your portfolio, developing your skills, and offering your skills was a service that they were demanding of me. They said, I want you to have these skills. I don't give a shit what you want. This is what we need. And if you want to get a job with us, that's what we expect from you. So if this is what you love, abandon that. We want you to be that instead. At least that's what it felt like at the time. That's not so much the case. Yes, you can do your own thing, and you can master your thing, and you can offer that as a service to a studio. But as I've described many times in the past, and I'm sure many other professionals out there that you listen to, Marc, Brunet, and Tyler Edlin, and Kelsey Rodriguez, and all of these different artists, they can attest to the fact that they probably spend a very good portion of their careers trying to figure out what the hell that industry was looking for. And more often than not, once you got that portfolio up to speed with what they were looking for that particular project that they were looking for, they'd already moved on to the next project, and a lot of these efforts might be obsolete. I can honestly attribute the fact that I know Flash and Adobe Premiere and After Effects and Maya and Softimage and 3ds Max and all of these different things to the fact that I was trying to get a job and I was trying to learn a skill that they were looking for. And I learned Softimage and I learned Maya, and sure as shit, they're looking for soft-image, so I had to learn soft-image while I was on the job. And then I get a job later on, and now they're looking for a 2D animator. Holy shit, I get to do 2D animation, but we're doing it in Flash. Or maybe they're doing it in Toon Boom. Oh my God. I learned a lot of skills in the process because I had to, and I'm grateful I did. But it was a painful, exhausting, endless process of just constantly trying to keep up with this evolution of technology. Because don't forget, this is at the early days of technology before certain softwares had really established themselves. Now we have more industry standards that people have had a chance to work on and evolve and tweak over the years. But I came in at the early phase of this stuff when a lot of this shit was really clunky and it was always changing. My YouTube channel was the thing that kept me accountable. It kept me reminding myself every single day, every single week, my audience are expecting something from me. And I feel that demand that I had imposed on myself, that responsibility that I had imposed on myself, is a demand, is a responsibility that artists in general tend to really thrive at. Because there's a very important difference between providing a service to a corporation, to a business, where you're just feeding their bottom line, you're producing artwork and producing assets and designing and spending ridiculous hours working, that feels like you're just a guy shoveling coal into a furnace that's going to get burned up for fuel, versus giving of yourself and allowing and offering what you have as an individual, something unique and valuable to you that can bring value to other people. So the contributions that you make, the contribution that I'm making to you right now as I speak right now, is a very rewarding and very valuable gift that I can give you, because it's personal, because I've earned it, because it's not something that everybody else can offer. I've been through my own share of experiences that a lot of you out there can relate to, and you can relate it back. So the relationship that we create between each other, this exchange that we make between each other, is not just an exchange of services. I'm not just handing you a product and you grab it and say, thanks, have a good day, and you walk out. It's a life lesson. It's a way of looking into your own life. It's a way of us sitting down and having a conversation together and saying, yeah, I've been through that too. And this is how I overcame it. And you share your feedback with me in the comments. This is personal. And to me, something personal is something that I hold in much higher emotional regard. And when you bring emotion, when you bring feeling back into the story, artists click on, don't they? Because I'm not just there, I don't want to feel like I'm just some service worker. I want to feel like I'm bringing true emotional value to other people in the first place. This is one of the reasons why we produce art in the first place. We are people who thrive in self-expression, and through the relationships and bonds that we make with other people, through that expression. Makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Now, there needs to be a distinction made between different types of artists. And I'm saying it in quotes because there are artists that when it's too expressive, when it's too personal, when it's too zen, a lot of artists totally lose their footing. I need something grounded. I need structure. I need method. I need fundamentals. I need something procedural. And a lot of artists realize at a certain point in their career, I'm not an artist. Necessarily. Not in that hippie sense of the word, although hippie's a bit insulting. Not in that traditional 1970s fine artist sense of the word, that traditional illustrator sense of the word. I consider myself more of a designer. I am somebody who prefers to adhere to the service aspect, to the providing a service aspect of art. A good example is Antonia Stappaerts from ArtWOD, whose growth and whose platform and whose business is just taken off. I promote him every chance I get. Another example would be Feng Zhu, who in one of his art talks many, many years ago was one of the first person who I ever heard say, I'm not an artist, I'm a designer. I don't live and breathe. This isn't my identity. This is just a service that I provide. And I provide it really, really well. I do the work. I'm willing to put in the hard work. I learn those fundamentals. I build my visual library, and I apply that to whatever my client is looking for. I provide that service. I move on with my life, and I do other things. I have other passions on the side, but art's not my passion. It's my job, and I treat it as such. I can't do it that way. That to me would be working. I would rather work as a waiter. I'd rather work in the service industry. I would rather, be a plumber, be a programmer, something like that. Something where I'm just providing the service, something that pays the bills, and then I can move on to other things. And I'd be perfectly happy doing it that way. But not when it comes to art. Not when it comes to dance, not when it comes to music, not when it comes to any of those things. To me, art needs to be a part of myself, or I get utterly turned off of it. So being a YouTuber was the key to unlocking my productivity, was the key to unlocking my consistency in the way I produced art. Because as an individual, when I'm producing art for myself, well, the only person I'm disappointing, the only person I'm letting down if I don't produce any art is myself. And the only real incentive I had to produce art was, well, I don't want to starve to death. I love producing art, but if I'm producing art, I got to do it this way, and I got to do it for that company that wants this thing for me because I need to pay my bills. So fine, I'll do it. And I did it. I did it for many years, and it was fine. It wasn't great. It was fine. Regardless which company I was working for, whether it be for Disney or EA or any company that I work for, it was always just a job. And it always felt that way. But YouTube is not a job. It never has been a job. And look what I've put into designing the studio. I've done all of this for YouTube. I don't need any of this crap. All the lighting and the studio setting and the audio and all this kind of stuff and the mic up here and all that kind of stuff. I don't do that for myself. I do that because I know it improves the quality of my ability to express myself to you. I've slowly but surely built up this little world that allows us to have this relationship. And that's where the value lies in it. This is why I invest money and time and energy and effort and learning and countless hours into it. And when I do, all of these life experiences that I have are an excuse for me to share it with you, to help you grow, to help you learn, to give you ideas on how you might be able to do this for yourself. And because I'm at the service of you, because I'm here for you and not for myself, even on those days where I'm just tired, man. I'm just tired. I've been working full time. I'm teaching. I'm editing and producing videos, and I'm shooting B-roll, and I'm carrying camera equipment around with me, and I'm doing all of these things at the same time. I would never give up on it. There's no reason for me to give up on it, and that makes it a lot easier for me to invest my life into it because I know that this is a long-term commitment. By giving up on that, I'm giving up on you, and it's much easier for me to disappoint myself than it is to disappoint you. The lesson in all of this that I want to share with you is, if you're struggling to find motivation, maybe it's because the only person that you're doing it for is yourself. The only person that you risk disappointing is yourself, and the worst punishment you're going to get for not doing anything is not having enough money, not having that independence. So at the early phase in your life, that independence, that financial stability, that ability to go and buy yourself some cool art equipment or buy yourself some clothes or pay for that date is a powerful enough incentive. But the novelty of that wears off, and at a certain point, if you're just burning yourself out in the studio, and that studio, providing that service to the studio, and your feelings of value and the value of your contributions to that studio, to that business, to that film production, whatever it is you're working on, is not emotionally rewarding to you because it's not something you have your heart in, this is when you start to burn out. And you can only sustain that for a certain length of time until eventually you just go, I just don't have the drive to keep this going. I'm burning the candle at both ends. For some people, they love this studio work. For some people, they can do this endlessly. And these are the people that thrive. But not everybody's built for that. Not everybody's built for this. Ken Robinson, the TED Talk, he said, schools are designed to produce professors. Not everybody's a professor. A lot of people are other things. And that's why schools need to change their attitude, because schools are only designed to really keep producing the same thing. And that thing that they're trying to produce is a little bit outdated, isn't it? And we need to start restructuring schools and the attitude and the curriculum to reflect the needs of today's professionals. And artists are right at the forefront of his argument. Artists in particular are unique in this whole story. What this means for you is, I want you to put some very strong consideration moving forward in your life, where you are right now, where you've been, and where you're going, on how you can take advantage of your talent, of your gift, be it the gift in dance, be it the gift in painting and drawing, be it illustration, be it design, be whatever it is you're doing. And ask yourself the question, how can I use this talent of mine? How can I use this gift of self-expression to create a connection with my audience? If you're not a communicator like me, if you're a bit more of an introvert and you don't like to share yourself too much, you like to keep it to yourself, that's perfectly fine, because that's why you're an artist in the first place. You can communicate through your art in a certain way. But when you're producing art, if all you're doing is producing art without the thought of who's receiving it at the other end and what emotional reward, what emotional experience they're going to have at the other end of it, then they're not going to see you at the other end, and you're not providing your audience with that part of yourself that brings their life value. So, yes, you do want to be selfish. Yes, you do want to find that unique form of self-expression as an artist. But you then, after that, once you start to really own that form of self-expression, you want to start channeling your thoughts towards, how can I express myself this way, and who's the audience that's going to benefit from that? And I want you to think about your audience when you're producing that art, so that you can provide them with that joy. You can provide them with that beauty. You can provide them with that euphoria. You can provide them with that fear, with that disgust, with that insight, with that thoughtfulness that people are craving. What is the lesson? What is the emotional experience that my audience is going to have? And if you think about that objectively, if you start looking around at different artists that are really, really well known, that do extremely well for themselves, look at artists like Loish, look at artists like Bobby Chiu, look at artists like Michael Kucha. They don't just draw pretty pictures. They draw experiences that have emotional value to other people. And I guarantee you, I'm sure if you ask any of them, any of these artists, if you get down to the nitty-gritty of their artistic focus, they are very much aware of their audience. They're very much aware of what their audience needs. And I've heard from the horse's mouth, I've heard from Bobby Chiu himself when I attended one of his schoolism workshops that they hosted at the school that I taught at, and we were a little after-hours party after. And Bobby Chiu was surrounded by a group of people. And one of the people that were talking to him asked him the question, how do you find success as an artist? How do you get people to care for what you do? And Bobby Chiu said verbatim, whatever you produce, you always have to be focused on the value it brings the person who's coming to look at it. You always have to be aware of that. And if you're not producing anything with that in mind, well, if you're not providing them with value, then there's no reason for them to pay attention, is there? And as such, everything that he draws, everything that he says, the workshops that he does, the artists that he hires, the way he designs his platform, everything that he puts together has always been and will always be, even prior to schoolism, back during Imaginism studios and the Toronto subway sketching and stuff like that. Way before any of that stuff, he was always the person providing value for other people, and it's because of that value he brought up to other people that he became the famous artist he is today and the amazing role model that he is today. So shout out to Bobby Chiu if you're listening. Fellow Canadian out there. Of course he's Canadian, because Canadians kick ass. So I want you to give some thought into this. If you're at the beginning of your artistic career, then your focus is in learning the language, learning those tools, those fundamentals, as every art school throws at you. You're learning the tools in the language to express yourself. And once you've developed a fluidity, once you become fluent in that language of artistic fundamentals, and you can start to express yourself in a much more profound and impactful way, it might be worth, at this point in your career, to start redirecting your thoughts towards how can I express myself in a way and present myself to an audience in a way that allows me to share that emotional and personal value from my art with them, so that we can create that bond artistically together and I can bring their life emotional and personal value as well. And when you do that, my fellow lady and gentlemen, you're going to start seeing that everybody's eyes are going to start turning and looking at you. I guarantee. And most of all, once you have their attention, once you find yourself being at the giving end of that value to other people, you are now at the service of them. And it's a lot more difficult to disappoint them than it is to disappoint yourself. And that's what's going to keep you getting up every single day, because people are going to be depending on you at that point. And being depended on is very, very inspiring and very empowering. All right. So hopefully that helps you out. And with that said, I love you all with all my heart, and happy painting. Take care.